My Gavanen Melonin, and well met indeed. I'm Arahir Galadirthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer. Welcome back to another faction overview, this time version 4.5 Dorwinion. Here we are, so let us dive straight in. So Dorwinion's starting size is average for most human-controlled nations. Strondost in the south, Karasant, your capital, in the north, Santanwi on the western border with the river there, and Neburka on the island over there. Of course, this is version 4.5 of Dorwinion, so even though there's been a lot of videos on the channel recently of the change regarding Mornadel and the Windan Forest, that of course is not yet in your games. This video being recorded on the 16th of May, 2020. In terms of army size, you don't really have a large one of those either. In the garrison in Strondost has got a couple unit of Thorn, same in Santenwi, same in Karasant. In fact, Karasant actually has your worst garrison with only some vineyard levies. Over here, Athel here with some bowmen. And up in the northwest is your best starting units, Norway. The Avari High Councillor comes with Avari warriors, spearmen and shadows, a fantastic little army that he starts with in the fort up there. Speaking of forts, you do get quite a few that are useful to you. Particularly, there's one here in Strondost, which allows you to guard that bridge, which is the only way into Dorwinion on the southern side, lest they sail at you. Once they capture Lest, actually, that was rather an interesting pun, but if I have to explain it, it loses all of its momentum. Up here on the northwest as well, there's that fort as well. But of course, that fort is only really useful if you go to war with, say, Dale, or if Dol Guldur comes down the Celdwyn, which they are unlikely to do. So not a massive army size at the beginning, and not a massive region size at the beginning. Custom generals then, let us go through. So Vine Regent Howin, your faction leader, he comes with High Paladins. That is not custom, they are your standard bodyguard. So does Vine Lord Swain, your faction heir, but Forthwin, however, comes with his own. Let's just turn off all the labels. Forthwin comes with Regent Spear Guard. So they're not an ultra elite unit like the Avari or the Morroquendi units of the Avari, nor the Vintner Court units of the human choice, but they are a good, solid, defensive unit. Although there is argument to suggest, of course, that the standard bodyguard would likely be better, but it's nice to have some customs. Similarly, Athel here over here is perhaps one of your better generals because he comes with Athala Rangers, so he's a fantastic archer unit at the start of the game. But those are the only two custom armies, custom bodyguards, sorry. So looking at the strategy models while we're here as well, your faction leader has a unique model, and that is what he will always look like. That's not unique to Howin, that's just what your faction leader will look like. A standard general looks like this fellow here, with the sort of circular plate thing in the center of his chest and the face mask on his armor. And your captains look like that. They look like your Thorn units, so just a basic purple, I don't hide in the forest, basic purple outlook. So there we are. So those are your strategy models. You do have, you have the Northmen strategy models for your towns and cities, so whilst they are unique to Divide and Conquer, they are not unique to Dorwinion. So this strategy model has been created for Dak by the Elite Dwarf, but it is used by all Northmen factions, so it is also shared by Dale and Rohan as well. Family tree, if we turn to that, Howin is your faction leader, and his brother-in-law Forthwin guards the southern passes of Dorwinion, but his son Swain is the faction heir at game start. There's only one man due to come of age, Frothir, the son of Forthwin over there. So you might wish to expand your family tree early to try and resolve any possible problems, but I doubt you'll run into any trouble. So turning to the geographical area then, it's evident of course that many of your battles will be fought on bridges as Dorwinion. They're a very defensive faction. They can be defensive. You can play them very aggressively. But the crossing into Strondost allows you to funnel runic forces from the south on the eastern side of the mountains. But do note that Rune is very, very fond of mopping up the lands of Ravanian over here and then coming through the Othelbed region to hit Santanwi from the south. They don't actually normally focus that much on Strondost. And a little bit like Age of Empires, by blocking this bridge, the AI, rather than thinking, right, if we fight that and get through, we're into Dorwinion, instead they think, oh, I can't get through there, so I'm just going to go all the way around here and come through here. So by standing and defending that bridge, you will often shepherd them that way anyway, so you can try and play around with it. In the north, you have a great protection. Previous versions of Divide and Conquer, there was a river crossing just here. We removed that because it wasn't very good to have one there, and it aids Dorwinion substantially by removing it. So you can't get into Dorwinion except from up here at the crossing of Erland's Ferry. which is what this region is called. So that is the nearest crossing on the northern side of the river, which gives you an excellent defensive advantage. But should you sail across to Winterionior and then into Rubar, you have got that river crossing there, which will help protect. And then coming further down, just north of Elgar, there's another river crossing there. So there's a lot of bridge battles around and in Dorwinion, with the mountains of Dorwinion splitting runic forces for you, which isn't too bad. Turning to the rebel regions around you, then, of course, it's a race to capture Ravanion. There are 3 contenders to this race, sometimes 4, usually only 3. You, Rune, and Dol Guldur. On the odd, very bizarre occasion, Mordor might get involved, but we have specifically tried to stop them doing that, which is why Dol Guldur gets all the way down to Dantalad at the beginning, and Rune goes to Varfest to shut Mordor out. But if Dantalad falls for some bizarre reason and Mordor takes it, they will flood into Ravanion as well. But generally speaking, you're racing Rune and Dol Guldur to mop up these regions. The forces from the forest will likely take Southis and Brownboat within a very short space of time. They may then teeter around Rawberg, but generally speaking, Dol Guldur has its hands full with the Anduin and with the elves, so they don't bother with you too much. But Rune will be all over this central region, and once they've finished that, they will then be all over you, all up in your grill. Custom battle maps before we deal with the actual neighbours and diplomacy. There aren't any around here. It's the most custom battle map devoid part of the entire map. The nearest custom settlements are Dol Guldur away to the west, Dale, Erskoroth and Erebor to the north, or Cirrig Gathol far to the north. Or then, of course, you've got the custom settlements of Mordor. But there are none in Rune, Dorwinion, or Ravanion itself, so you'll be on normal battle maps for much of the game playing as Dorwinion. So, neighbours and diplomacy. Of course, you start right next to Rune, but you do not start at war with them. So if you wish to, you can break your alliance with Dale, who do start at war with them. No, they don't. No one does. We changed it purposefully for you, so you don't have to anymore. So you're allied to Dale. Previously, Dale used to start at war with Rune, which meant you couldn't ally Rune. But now we removed that so that you can. So you're allied to Dale and you're allied to the Woodland Realm, to whom you sell most of your wine, hence the connection. But you aren't at war with anyone yet. You will note, as I've just laboured the point drastically, that Rune are not enemies of anyone you are allied to. So you can try, however difficult, and it will be difficult, but you can try, if you wish, to get an alliance with Rune so that they don't attack you. Now, if you do that, the campaign is completely devoid of challenge because you've taken away your only enemy. But if that is what you want to do, play the game how you want to play it. Don't let us discourage you from that. So Rune is available as an ally if you wish. If you don't ally with them, they will attack you by around about turn 15. They come for you almost straight away because you start right next to each other. You have cultural differences, and they're also predetermined to not like you, which is why allying with them is quite a challenge. Outside of that, though, of course, you can try and strike up an alliance with the dwarves, which is advisable because they border Rune as well. But do note the dwarves don't really bother with Rune in Divide and Conquer anymore. In Third Age Total War, Rune and the dwarves go at each other non-stop. They are chief enemies. In Divide and Conquer, Dorwinion is Rune's chief enemy, and the dwarves have to contend with Gundabad. That is who they will be fighting against for most, if not all, of the game, with the two in a relative stalemate. Economy, buildings, diplomat, ships, yada yada yada. Your diplomat comes from Karasant. He comes from a unique building called the Vintner Court, which is a name we shall see again a little later on, which is the complex where your nation's power and prestige comes from. You can always denote unique buildings because I made sure that they were all take this circular format, because we don't have the skills to actually hand draw unique UIs for unique buildings. So instead we've taken obviously images we can find on the web and ensured to give them all exactly the same format, so you always know that's a unique building because it's got that sort of circular design. Which is I would much rather it had an actual UI, but it's I don't like mismatched UIs either, so if we were to draw one, I'd want it to match the same thing. So if we can't get it to match, we might as well just go all in with it being different. But anyway, that's where your diplomat comes from. Sorry, that was very tangential. You don't get a diplomat in Saint-Henri, and there's no unique building there. You do get ships. You are a nation that gets ships, but you only, of course, get the first ship, which is just simply called the Longship. You don't get it for 14 turns, but if Brassidas has his way, you will be able to train that boat straight away in future versions. I don't know if we've acceded, if we've acquiesced to his request yet. I don't think we have, but he keeps plugging away with it. So that boat may be available in version 5 straight away, but for your games right now, you have to wait 14 turns before you can build a boat, but you do get them. Note that the boats are only available in certain regions, and there's no identifier to say which regions. So if you can't train a boat in a certain region, that is on purpose. It is not a bug. And it is an attempt to stop boats being trained in regions where we don't want them, specifically the Anduin. We do not want boats being trained in the Anduin, so you can't train boats in any of the ports along here. Similarly, the Sea of Rune, not every region around the sea actually trains boats. So you might get one or two places where you can't get them. But once you've defeated Rune anyway, you don't even need the boats. Unless you're going to attack Dale, there's literally no point to them anymore. So you may as well just disband them anyway. You might get the odd rebel ship pop up in the seas, but we have done what we can to try and completely negate rebel spawns. But sometimes the game does very odd things. Many of you know that plagues still exist in the game, despite the fact that in all the files there is no mention of plagues anywhere. They've been specifically turned off, and yet the game still randomly gives you plagues every now and then in the highest tier cities, which means it's hard-coded basically. But anyway, enough of that. The Advanced Blacksmith Dorwinion do not get an Advanced Blacksmith. Instead, you get a triple point boost from siding with the Avari, and it comes from just your highest tier of Blacksmith. So, whereas everyone else has to build an extra building, for you, the third tier of your armourer simply will give you an extra tier of armour if you side with the Elves. You will note that you get quite a lot of buildings as Dorwinion, and your economy is an easy one to nurture. Dorwinion is Dorwinion are kind of like the definitive mercantile faction of Divide and Conquer. We've always tried to hammer home that they are good at making money, because that's basically the only thing we know about them from the lore. And where Divide and Conquer has made up its own factions some time ago, they're all based on sort of one or two sentences, Cant, Enedwythe and Dorwinion being prime examples. And so we know that Dorwinion sells wine to the elves, so that is why we've focused on them as merchants. So they get various merchant buildings, particularly the guild. There's the Merchants Guild courtesy of Anno. You do get the Warriors Guild, which gives you a melee weapon and then morale bonus, but note you only get 2 tiers of the Warriors Guild. I've always hated that UI, but we use it in quite a few places, but I just really don't like it. I'd really like to replace that building. It's so ugly. I should really look for one, shouldn't I? Otherwise, you get all the standard buildings that you can expect, including the winery. The winery does not require that you side with humans or elves. You get that all the time anyway, and you get it wherever wine is present on the map, which is one of those very unique buildings. There's only about 5 buildings that use this. But wherever you actually see wine as a resource, which is this building here, you will be able to build a winery. So you can get one in most of the regions of Dorwinion, and then I think there are other places where wine is scattered around the world. But the winery is a very, very useful building, as you may have seen when I just clicked on it then, in that it gives you a trade boost bonus, it gives you an income of 65, which isn't all that much, but it's something. Happiness and a culture increase. But note that there's only 1 tier of the winery, so it is just a small eco bonus. Now, turning then to, of course, the choice, which is the whole Dorwinion's main thing. It's the only script that applies to Dorwinion, and it has effects with buildings. But we'll start with the general choice and the way that it actually works. So bear with me. I have written it down once again. I'll just turn the page. So at turn 54, you will get given the choice. A message pops up, it explains, and you get to say whether you're going to side with the elves or the Northmen. So in this iteration of the game, you are literally siding with Elven or Northman peoples, and the other ones are sort of ushered out of your society, but it isn't that clear-cut. But the basic point of the choice is to give you a different set of units, but there are a few other ancillary benefits. So at turn 54, you have to make your choice, elves or humans. Now, if you choose elves, that is the military side. It unlocks a military building in Santanwi called the Academy, Avari Academy, or simply Dorwinion Academy, or something along those lines. And it's not listed, which is annoying. The wine depository is listed, so why is the Academy not listed? Very annoying. But anyway, it gives you an academy over here that gives you a boost to retraining of units. It gives you a melee weapon bonus. And that's about it, really. It just makes Santanwi a much better recruitment location. I think it gives you more recruitment slots as well. So you get that building in Santanwi, and you get 6 elven units. You get the elite pikes, the elite archers. You get the archers that we've already seen over here, the just shadows, idiot. And then you get those 2 units as well, the spearmen and the warriors. And lastly, you get a horse archer unit. So that's the elven choice. You get a military boost in Santanwi, and you get 6 elven units. If you choose the human path, you get the economic building in most of Dorwinion, which is the wine depository. Oh, there's the Dorwinion Academy. Oh, hang on, let's go over here and read the wine depository, and then we can go back. Oh, no, we'll start with let's look at that. So this is the Dorwinion Academy. Retraining cost bonus, morale bonus, and recruitment slots increase. And then it gives the second tier, even though those are all removed in future, the second tier at the moment, it gives a bonus for archers and cavalry, and a much better morale bonus. But the same retraining cost and recruitment slot boost. So that's the Academy. And jumping over to the depository, if you choose the humans, the wine depository is available in, it's supposed to be Karasant, but I think there might be a bug that it's Karasant and Naburka, or it may simply just be Naburka. But you can only get it in either 1 or 2 places, but I can't quite recall because we've since fixed that problem and the script has changed entirely in the future anyway. But you should be able to get it in 1 place, and it just gives you a trade bonus. It's quite a sizable trade bonus, but the game never shows you the actual amount of increase in goods that you're getting, which is really annoying. Even if it was just an arbitrary number, it would be more helpful. But that could be a 15-point boost to your trade, which may equate to 1,000 extra gold coins, or it could be a 1-point boost to your trade. Now, it is a substantial boost. I think it's about 6 and 8, which is very, very high. A normal market gives you 1 in tradable good increase per tier. So the first market gives you a trade boost of 1, the next one gives you 2, 3, 4, etc. So if this is giving 4, it's a fantastic building. It gives free upkeep at the second tier as well. So you get the wine depository, and you get 7 human units. You get an elite foot unit, elite sword and board, an elite cavalry unit, a medium tier axe unit, medium tier spear, medium tier crossbow, and the Athala Rangers, who we've already seen on Athel here. They come in the human choice only. And lastly, you get something called Dorwinion Armsmen, who are a 2-handed sword, I believe. We'll see in the second half of the video. So you get 7 units that are far more readily available. They take about 10 to 15 turns to replenish. The elves take about 15 to 20 turns to replenish. You get the eco building under the human choice, and you get the military building under the elven choice. And it all kicks off at turn 54. But note that the barracks event obviously doesn't kick off till turn 61. So the units that you get, you won't even be able to get them for at least 7 turns after you made the choice. Unless you've made the... you get the medium tier unit straight away, but the elites will be locked off until after the barracks event. Then at turn 72, an army will spawn with the units from the side you didn't choose. So if you chose Elven, then at turn 72, a human general called Edwardin will spawn, and he has all of the human units that you would have had access to. Now you can't retrain those units, so once they're dead, so be careful with them. And likewise, if you chose human, then a gentleman called Avelin will spawn, and he has all of the Elven units at turn 72 in this version. So that's the choice. That's all it does. It just defines the late game roster you're going to use. The buildings are very, very minor, to be honest. It's all about just the units. So those are all the gameplay scripts and events that affect Dorwinion, and then it comes to difficulty. And I must confess, I don't think Dorwinion is a difficult campaign at all. I would easily put it at a 2. Because yes, Rune are a powerful neighbour, but they're your only neighbour. You only have to fight Rune. They can quite easily be killed through regicide, which we are making steps to change things like that in the future. But they can be killed through regicide on the odd occasion, and also it's very easy to cripple their power by taking Lest and Mistrand, which is their 2 most important settlements, which also happen to be right next to your heartlands. So every time I've played Dorwinion, I've been able to easily succeed. So in my mind, if I'm able to do it with no trouble, it's definitely a low difficulty rating. And so that's why, as I say, I'll put it at a 2. The only thing to watch out for, which isn't really a difficulty thing, but Rune are really, 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 really keen on getting Naburka. I don't know why, but they absolutely love this region, and they will constantly sail troops there to try and capture it. So watch out for that. But once Rune falls, you've absolutely won the campaign. There is no challenge after that, and it's then just how far do you want to take it? Do you want to turn evil and take down Dale and Erebor, or do you want to sucker punch Mordor from behind, because they will not have any defense against you whatsoever. So if you're coming in from the south, or from the east, sorry, Mordor just puts up no defense. So it's a very straightforward and simple campaign once you've beaten Rune. So definitely a 2. So that concludes the campaign side of the battle. Let's jump over to the battle map and have a look at their fantastic roster. Welcome to the battle map and Dorwinion's starting army. So A quick overview shows that Dorwinion has pretty much everything covered, but of course do remember that a good number of the units that are spread out in front of you at the moment are not actually available depending on which choice you make. If you choose the human route you're a far more infantry-focused faction. If you choose the elven route, you're a far more archer-focused faction. That's a very, very basic breakdown. But unfortunately, Dorwinion is one of the first nations in all of these faction overviews that has too many units for a single army, so I've had to put the 2 militia units over as an ally. So we can start with those. So Dorwinion has a trash tier, which is not every nation does, actually, so consider yourself lucky. And they are your vineyard units, vineyard bowmen and levies. So the levies, 2 attack, 2 charge, 6 defense. Their attack and charge is about as poor as a snagger, but their defense is actually reasonably good, so they might hold on a little while. But in truth, they're just garbage. They're very, very cheap, they don't cost very much, but their morale's poor, their response is poor, their stats are poor, they're there to die. I've said this many times, but it's worth hammering it home. Certain units are purely there to tie up better units, to try and make those units tired, or indeed to just hold those units in place while your cavalry or archers kill them. And the Vineyard Levies are such a unit. They're also very useful for taking enemy arrow fire, to waste enemy arrows on a unit that you don't care about. They are incredibly easy to train and recruit, and you should throw them into the battle as wantonly as one wishes. They have no... I mean, they are people after all, but they're just not very good people. The bowmen, similar sorts of stats, even worse defense. Do note they do have a 2 missile attack, and there are 170 of them though. So they will do some actual damage. The bowman unit is useful and has a role in all armies, apart from very possibly after turn 180 or something. But the Vineyard Levies very quickly go out of fashion and should be shunned. And then we come to your proper units. These are the units you're going to use an awful lot of, and you can train straight away from Saint-Anouilh and with only a little bit of infrastructure from Strondost as well. And they are the Thorn regiments. So there are Bladesmen, there are Halberdiers, although they're called Guard. No, I think they're proper pike units now, actually. They were halberdiers, but they're pikes now. And there's crossbows, cavalry, and mounted crossbows. So we'll start with the Bladesmen. They have a nice big round shield emblazoned with the wreaths that have come to depict Dorwinion in much of our iconography. And they are a solid unit. They're about as good as Gondor Militia, so they occupy that similar sort of tier and role. Attack is 6, charge is 3. That's not fantastic, but when you've got a trash unit to compare it to, they're not too bad at all. And a defense of 10, nice and strong on the defense for an earlier tier unit. Note that their morale also is average, and their morale response is average. So they're quite a nifty little unit. Very, very handy. Unfortunately, because they're listed as a mercenary unit, I can't show you their cost, but we'll get a cost in a moment. There we are, 580. So all of these units are about 600 in cost, meaning that their upkeep is anywhere between 200 and 300 gold coins per turn. The Thorn Guard, as I mentioned, are a pike unit, so the 3 attack is very, very useful. Because they will... Oh, no, sorry, they are halberdiers. I've lied to you. It used to be the other way around. They're now halberdiers. They used to be pikes. So they don't get the pike animation boost, but they are effective against armor, which is a trait of all halberdiers, even though they're basically wielding a sword on a stick. Ignore that. Their attack is 3, charge is 3, defense of 9. They're a very good defensive unit, and they are fantastic at killing cavalry. Now, Rune doesn't get as much cavalry as it used to, because, of course, we took away their cavalry bodyguards. But they do get Arulad Dragon Riders, and they use them quite often in the early game, and the Thorn Guard will make mincemeat of those Arulad, so a useful unit to train and one you definitely want in your army. Turning then to Dorwinion. Dorwinion, unless you choose the elves, are a crossbow-heavy faction. They're one of the few really crossbow-human factions, and their first archer or ranged unit reflects that, because they're a crossbow unit. So crossbows are always effective against armor in the game. You can argue till you're blue in the teeth as to whether or not a bow or a crossbow is better at armor piercing, or indeed if neither are armor piercing. But in order to make crossbows actually useful, they have to be armor piercing, because without that, they are singularly the worst unit in Medieval 2 Total War, because the game engine cannot handle crossbows very well at all. So they need the armor piercing to make them worthwhile. Their melee is 3, so don't use them in melee. Their total defense is only 6, so don't let the enemy shoot them. But if you can get them around the back of an enemy, their armor-piercing damage helps alleviate the fact that they've got a terrible missile attack of only 6. Now, I say that's terrible because, as I say, crossbows are useless, so they need boosts in order to make them good. And crossbows average an attack stat of around 10 or 11. So one with 6 is really garbage. Even though in a moment I'm about to tell you that the Athala Ranger's missile attack of 6 is brilliant, but when that's on a crossbow, it's garbage, because they fire too slowly for that to be worthwhile. Their morale is average, morale response average, 26 missiles, 140 meter range, and an accuracy that is at par, that is subpar, is what I tried to say there, but failed, is only, unfortunately, average. So I absolutely hate them, if I'm honest, and I try never to train them if I can get around it, but they are there for you. Moving over then, your first cavalry units. Now, the Thorn Riders are a good early game cavalry unit. They're one of the ones that will actually do something other than just chase down routing enemies. 4 attack, granted, not fantastic, but a charge bonus of 5 and a defense of 9 makes them a little better than other militia at this tier. And given that it's a long time before you actually get any other cavalry, because you're not a very big cavalry faction, they are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you at the early game. Note that their secondary attack is better than their first. So they are better swordmen than they are cavalry, because they are just Thornbladesmen on a horse with a spear. So their initial charge is actually worse than the damage they will then do in the few follow-ups before you run them out again. But as I say, they're going to be your main cavalry unit for most of the game, so get used to loving them because you will need to. Because if you hate them, you won't use them as well as you want. And lastly, the Patrollers, another unit that I loathe with a burning passion, but it's there if you want to use it, Mounted Crossbows. Mounted Crossbows, you would think, would be brilliant, because they have the opportunity to run away from the enemy, and thus you can use the fact that crossbows are best utilised by shooting the enemy in the back. The cavalry can run round the back and do that. But the Thorn Patrollers, for whatever reason, are just absolutely useless. And the enemy, because they are outranged by almost everything and then everything's dog, they die all the time. Enemy arrow fire will absolutely slaughter these fools. So, in my mind, to be honest, they're a wasted 670. But if you find a use for them, then go for it. Now, I particularly don't like them because of my play style. I mean, if they were that useless, we wouldn't have them in the mod. We would have cut them out. But they are useful in certain circumstances, and people that are actually good at playing the game may get much more use out of them than I do. But I hate them, and I never train them. But it is up to you. I should have mentioned at the beginning, by the way, that Dorwinion is my second favourite faction, or third, sorry, after Bree and Dol Amroth. So I've played Dorwinion a lot because I really like them. And I never recruit those damn patrollers. Well, I do, to be honest, because necessity arises, but I don't want to. I die a little inside every time I click on the button to buy them. So then we come to after the barracks event. This is where the choice is then going to have kicked in. So after the barracks event, there's only a single unit that is available regardless of the choice you make, and that is the Dorwinion infantry. And here they stand before us. Now, they are a hybrid unit, which may well come into the roster for Dorwinion in the future a lot more now that we've embraced a hybrid nation rather than choosing one or the other. And so some of their number with the hoods are meant to be elves, and the others with the chainmail, coifs, are humans. So they're a half and half. But you'll note that they're a spear unit. They are just a far more better... That's too many words. They are a far better version of Vineyard Spearmen. Or Vineyard Levies, they're called, aren't they? Sorry. Their attack is 5, their charge is 3. Attack and charge are always lower on defensive units because they've always got a much better defense. So they're not there to kill much, but they are there to hold the line and let something else do the killing. Their defense of 15 is fantastic, and with a nice shield stat of 4, arrow fire is not something they need concern themselves with too much. They can form a shield wall, which is also very, very helpful, and of course they're skilled against mounts. They have a 5% movement speed buff over other infantry, and they have a good morale and good morale response. So they will deal relatively well with morale shocks. So then we come to the choice, and we'll start with the humans because the humans come in earlier than the elves. So the first units you're going to get under the human choice are Regent, Spear Guard, Axe Guard, and Bow Guard. So we will deal with those first. The Spear Guard are once again just a better version of the Dorwinion infantry. Because do know, I think the Dorwinion infantry actually comes in before the barracks event. So you do get those ones first, and then the Regent will come in after. So if memory serves, but if it doesn't happen that way, it doesn't happen that way. The infantry are much cheaper than the Spear Guard. So there is that. But they'll be a relatively similar cost. But you'll note the Spear Guard, 6 attack, 3 charge, 20 defense. They're only slightly better than the infantry. Their defense is 5 better, which is notable. And their attack, though, is only 1 better. So they're not... if they were to fight one another, there'd be very little in it. Their morale is the same, and they are slightly slower. So those are the Regent Spear Guard. They have this very cool Byzantium design and flavour and feel to them. They are supported by a unit that really will start getting some kills, the Axe Guard. The first dedicated armor-piercing unit that doesn't use a crossbow in your entire roster, other than the Thorn Guard, but they're a very niche armor-piercing unit. You wouldn't really use them as strike infantry. So this is the first and last of your proper armor-piercing strike infantry. They have an 8 attack, a 6 charge, and a 15 defense. So a nice mid-tier strike unit. Very, very useful. Not too expensive for what you're getting. The morale is good, and the morale response is good as well. And supporting them then, as I say, are the Regent Bowguard, who even though they're called Bowguard, they use a crossbow, but I don't think that matters. The word bow is in crossbow. They're effective against armour, obviously. Their missile attack now, as I say, is up to 10, so they'll actually do something. Their defence is 15 compared to the 6 of the Thorn, and their melee is 6 and charge is 3. So when they finish with their bows, their crossbows, they are not too bad melee infantry, and they will do some reasonable damage, but do of course try and use up all their crossbow bolts before you throw them in. Their high missile attack of 10 with an effective against armor trait finally means they will be doing some killing, and they're very good at picking off Rune's highly armoured bodyguard unit, which plows around the field with the halberd now and does a lot of damage. 26 missiles, 150 meter on the range, and their accuracy is high, which is good for a crossbow, because crossbows are... I don't know if I've mentioned this, but crossbows are useless, and I absolutely hate them, but having high accuracy gives at least some benefits. Also, choosing the human route, you get the Athala Rangers, which also has the interesting accolade of being the only AOR unit in your roster, if memory serves, unless the Paladins are. No, I didn't think they were. So the Athala Rangers are only available between Rovanion, or in Rovanion, between East Mirkwood and Dorwinion. So basically anywhere south of the Kelduin River, anywhere north of the Ered Lthui, the Ash Mountains, and then east of Mirkwood and west of the Sea of Rune. That large square in the centre there, that's where they come from. They have a good morale response, fast movement speed, 240 meter range, the highest in your army, apart from possibly the Morroquendi Sentinels. No, they're even better than them. Because they are a ranger unit, of course. So we tried to make rangers always very good human archers. Very high accuracy, 32 missiles, but do note they've only got a 6 missile damage. I say only, that's very, very good for an actual archer unit, but they are going to be eclipsed by the elves, which you would expect. They're not very good at taking damage, as with all rangers really. They don't like being shot back at. If the enemy shoots them, their defense goes down to 6, with only the armor stat being involved, which is really, really low. Your Vineyard levies have that much defense against arrows, although it's slightly less actually, but it's a very poor defense. So don't let them get shot, but make sure they do lots of shooting, because they've got plenty of range, so it helps keep them staying away. Right, and then we turn over to our first of the elven units that joins you, the Avari Shadows. Now, this is essentially a better version of the Athala Rangers. They can hide anywhere, which I forgot to mention the Athala can as well. Their melee is 8, their missile 8, their charge is 4. So it's 1 better, 2 better, and 1 better on the attack stats. And their defense is 3 better as well. But do note, again, they don't like being shot at. Their defense is 15, but if they're being shot at, their defense is only 7. So don't let the enemy shoot them, because they will quickly kill them. They have a 220 meter range, but their accuracy is exceptional, the best it can possibly be. Now that doesn't mean they are pinpoint accurate every single time, but it means they are very, very close. They have 32 missiles as well, and a 15% movement buff over other units, which means if you want to skirmish with them, they are very unlikely to ever be caught by any ground infantry, because they're really fast. Note, of course, that Athala and the Shadows are the two that can hide anywhere, so you can quite easily lay ambushes with both of those. Okay, so Dorwinion is broken down into 4 tiers, which so far I don't think we've actually seen on the faction overviews, but we may have done, I forget. But we have a second tier before we reach our elites. And we'll continue on the theme of humans before we go back to the elves. So the human sort of mid-upper tier are the Dorwinion Armsmen, who I mentioned before are a two-handed sword unit. They wear a shield on their back, but you don't get a shield stat because of the way that the shield stat applies. Having one on the back wouldn't actually do anything. So it's just there for visuals, really. But their attack is 14, charge is 8, and total defense is 18. So they're fantastic strike infantry, only let down by the fact they don't have armor piercing. Their morale is very good. Their morale response is good, so they're going to deal with shocks well. But they don't get a speed bonus either, because they're plated down, or they're weighted down rather, with the chainmail suits that they seem to be head to toe wearing. But a very, very good unit for the cost. They will prove very useful to you in the battles to come. But then the elves also give you a couple of units at this tier, the warriors and, I can't remember what the other one's called, spearmen. Very simple. So the spearmen are actually a javelin unit as well. They throw a few javelins before they whap out their spears. No, don't read into that. They're adept at hiding in woods. They are effective against armor with their javelins, but not with their spears. They get a bonus against mounts, again, this time with both weapons. All javelins and all spears get a bonus against mounts. Their melee attack is 9, which is really good for a spear unit. Their missile attack is 9, which is very good for a javelin unit. Their charge is 5, and their defense is 21. They are a really good unit. And javelins on spear units make sense because then they get a javelin throw in before they then have to deal with combat, and it gives them just that extra edge of being a good defensive unit. They only get 3 javelins, 65 meter range, which is slightly higher than the average of 55, and their accuracy is high, which is nice for a javelin unit. Supporting them are the elven version of the Armsmen, the Avari warriors. So their attack is 13, whereas the Armsmen's 14. Their charge is 6 compared to 8. But their defense is 19 compared to 18. So they are very, very similar to the Dorwinion Armsmen. They really are just the elven version of the Armsmen. The stats played around a little bit. But do note, being elves, they're faster at 10%, but otherwise their stats are really, really similar. Even their cost is really similar. So they're a faster version of the Armsmen, basically. But remember, the Armsmen are human only, the Avari are elven only, so these two units will never be on the field together anyway. Also, the Avari give you your next and your last cavalry unit if you've chosen elves, the Naharim. Side note, Nahar is the horse of Arome, the Valar, the kind of scout of the Valar, the one who finds the elves way back when, and so they've named themselves after him. Naharim means peoples of Nahar, and if you're wondering, yes, I made the name up, which is why I am self-aggrandizing right now. Anyway, they are a horse archer unit, a relatively good one. Not as good as the horse archers of Cannes, so if you do make it down there and are fighting against them, do watch out. But primarily their main use is actually being a normal cavalry unit once they've finished with their bows. So their melee attack is 9, with a charge of 6 and a defense of 17, which is good for a mid-tier cavalry to charge into an enemy. Their missile attack is 7, which is also very nice for a horse archer. 140 meter range, so you'll be outranged by most ground archers at this tier. Your accuracy, though, is high, and you have 30 missiles. Note that you get a bonus against generally mounts, but you also get a bonus specifically against Easterling Cataphract Cavalry, which is the Lok Inas Rim. So they are designed to kill the heavy, slow cavalry of Rune. And then after that, just all other horses. They are an anti-cavalry cavalry unit. Their morale is excellent. Their speed is 12% greater than other cavalry as well, so they get a nice movement speed bonus. They will be able to run away from the Lok Inas Rim until the last sun sets on the universe. They are always going to be faster than them. So an excellent unit to run rings around the heavy armour of Rune. And then finally we come to your elite. So again, we'll keep with the humans first. The Vintner Court Knights are the elite human choice. They are a heavy sword and board unit. No frills attached, literally just a heavy sword and board unit. 12 attack, 5 charge, 25 defense. Much like you'd expect from a sword and board. A relatively good attack because they're elites. The charge isn't fantastic, but the defense is nice and solid. Note that their defense is over half in armor alone, so watch out for armor piercing units. They'll be particularly good against them. Their morale is very good. The response is good. No movement speed bonus, and their morale is not locked. Dorwinion is not a nation of elite, let us fight to the death warriors. You are still just general Northmen. You will run away when the proverbial hits the fan. And also at the human tier, you get the last and best cavalry unit for Dorwinion, which is a fantastic cavalry unit and will do a lot of damage. Even though they don't have a spear, they are mighty, and they are the Paladins. Now, ostensibly, they are just mounted knights, but of course, because they get a horse and a better charge, they deal so much damage. They're a fantastic unit. They are not as good as the Lok Inas Rim. You do have to bear that in mind. But Lok Inas Rim are so rare, you will probably have defeated Rune before you ever have to fight against them. If you haven't, then watch out because the Inas Rim will beat the Paladins. Their morale is very good, their response is impetuous, so they deal well with shocks, but they are slightly faster than other horses, but again, they get a bonus against mounts. So they are another anti-cavalry cavalry unit, which does give them a nice boost, but they cost a reasonable amount. But you will note, of course, that neither the Vintner Court Paladins nor Knights have a morale bonus for your troops or a fear bonus for the enemy. So you don't have any really standout elite units as Dorwinion. You're a very average military force. And the only units that really aren't average are the Paladins, and then the last two we have to talk about. The Morroquendi Protectors are a candidate for the best pike unit in the game, and I think I did a pike overview. If I didn't, they're definitely top 3. I would have put them up there with 1st Legion and I don't know who I'd choose as third, actually. But they're a fantastic pike unit. An 8 attack, a 6 charge, and a 24 defense. Many's the time in my campaigns with Dorwinion, the Morroquendi Protectors have come out with inordinate amounts of kills. Far greater than the number of men in their battalion. They are nigh on indestructible. Their only real fear is arrow fire, because despite the fact that when an arrow shoots them, their armor is 15, if a crossbow unit shoots them, which Rune happens to have quite a few of, then they're in a little bit of trouble, because then their armor stat is only 7. So that's their biggest fear, is crossbows, so watch out for that. Their morale is excellent, good morale response, and a 5% movement speed over other infantry. Of course, they're pikes, so they triple the attack. We're talking one of the highest attacks, really, of any unit. They are absolute slayers. So just make sure you keep their flanks protected and make sure that enemy crossbows don't shoot them, because crossbows will have a field day with these. And lastly, supporting them and trying to stop any crossbows getting in range are one of your best archer unit and one of the best archer units on the whole eastern side of the map. If you were to take a line right down the eastern border of Mirkwood to the bottom of the map, you'll struggle to find a better archer on that side of the line, on the eastern side. They can use sharpened stakes, and you will also have noted that the knights can place sharpened stakes as well. But remember, you can't get knights and sentinels in the same army, apart from one very specific occasion, if you have Avalyn with some knights in his army. They have a 9 melee, a 9 missile, which is fantastic, a charge of 6, so not really very good in terms of charge, but the 9 melee and 24 total defense means that even when they have finished with their arrows, or indeed if an enemy does close them down, they will put up a nice fight. They're excellent morale, good morale response, 5% movement speed buff again, 210 meter range, very high accuracy, and 32 missiles. And they've been steadily improved upon by Hummingbirds since the first iteration of this unit was created some 8 years ago. Now I think they are a really nice unit. They used to have a really bizarre helmet that made them look like they had a bug's head on top of their head. It was really bizarre. But now they have just nice hoods, and you can see the hint of a helmet underneath the hood on a couple of the units. So a fantastic archer, very, very costly, but a really, really deadly archer. The only thing that's really going to outrange or outdo them is if you turn on a good nation, to be honest, because the good nations have the best archers. So you're unlikely to get anything that'll beat you if you fight against Rune and Kand and Mordor and Dol Guldur. And lastly, we come to your bodyguard, the High Paladins. Now these are again another unit that is highly subject to change in version 5 because we've now made an elven-human hybrid faction, so this bodyguard will probably be changed to reflect that. But at the moment, they are just a two-handed sword heavy infantry. And they're very, very good at what they do. They're just a much better version of Dorwinion armsmen. So their attack is slightly better, but their defense is substantially better. But they're just heavy-hitting charge infantry. So try not to use the General's Bodyguard as a defense unit. You want to try and use Dorwinion's Generals aggressively, because that is where they shine. They're not actually fantastic on the defense, because they don't have a shield. But then their defense is still obviously 25. But again, like the pikemen, they are highly susceptible to crossbow fire, so try not to let the enemy shoot you with crossbow bolts. And that is it. That is Dorwinion's roster. So, an absolutely fantastic faction if you ask me, but then I would say that I'm the leader of the mod. But I think they're a really, really good, interesting and engaging faction. And with the changes that are coming in version 5, they've just been enhanced even more. There's a little bit of everything in Dorwinion for anyone who wants it. They've got some trash if you really need to just plow out those units without thinking about it. They've got excellent elite units, which gives you some nice variety, and they've got replayability because you could play them twice, and both of those campaigns would be certainly different depending on the choice you make, which not every faction has. Now, we don't try to make every faction have fantastic replayability, but Dorwinion just benefits from its choice script. But anyway, then we move on to who are we fighting next week. And there's a lot of browns going on in the sprites at the moment, aren't there? It's a very dull coloured faction. There's a lot of infantry. I'm not seeing much cavalry at all. There's a couple of units of cavalry that seem to be flanking around the side, but that's away over there. There seem to appear to be a unit with some sort of contraption carrying behind the horses. A chariot, you might even call it. So place your bets now as we move in, as the enemy army will get smashed by our Dorwinion forces, I expect, today, because we are going to show you Ennard Wythe next time. The Wildmen, the Riverfolk, the Fishermen, the men forgotten to history, the clansmen of Ennard Wythe. So here they all come in. They have a very cool banner, courtesy of Matt's, which has been, again, reflected and worked upon many, many times. And they now have chariots, as there they are, running away. Hustling down, they're beelining in for our trash units. It's going to be an absolute massacre if they hit those trash units. Because they will slaughter them. But they do throw javelins, so they pull up to throw those in before they charge. But anyway, it is Enidwythe next week that we will deal with. The brown colouring is very, very... I don't know. I've set that up poorly. A lot of their units are brown, basically. It's a heavily used colour throughout Enidwythe's roster. Lots of furs, lots of leather. So it's always all kind of a dull brown colour. But anyway, there we are. That concludes Dorwinion. So thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. I do hope you've enjoyed this faction overview. I hope it may have taught you something you maybe didn't know, or maybe it makes you think, I'm going to play as Dorwinion, because they look fun. But until we speak again, dear friends, Nevair na den perimad melunin, and farewell.